High Admiral Zextal of the Galactic Confederation stood motionless before the Great Council's viewing screen, mandibles twitching in barely contained agitation. The images from the surveillance drones showed yet another human settlement expanding across a previously uninhabited world. It was the fourth this cycle alone. They simply claim worlds without seeking proper authorization, he reported, voice modulated to convey appropriate deference to the assembled council members. When our diplomatic vessels attempt contact, they respond with what their translators call paperwork and continue their activities. First Speaker Ixil, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns, leaned forward. Surely they understand the protocols. The briefing package was comprehensive. That's the peculiar part, honored speaker. They reviewed our materials and replied that while they appreciate the information, they see no reason to halt their expansion efforts. Zextal's secondary arms twitched, betraying his confusion. They claim their mathematical models show the galaxy can support millions of spacefaring civilizations without resource conflict. The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Such blatant dismissal of Confederation authority was unprecedented. For 10,000 years, the Confederation had maintained peace through careful regulation of expansion and resource allocation. New species were expected to integrate gradually, accepting guidance from more established civilizations. How do they respond to standard containment procedures? Asked third speaker Nixis, their vaporous form swirling with concern. They don't, honored speaker. When we positioned fleet elements to blockade their colony ships, they simply plotted new courses to different systems. When we attempted to establish quarantine boundaries, they developed faster engines. They appear to interpret our containment efforts as engineering challenges rather than political mandates. First Speaker Ixil's crystalline surface clouded momentarily. Fascinating. And concerning. Have they shown aggressive tendencies? No, honored speaker. That's what makes them so perplexing. They maintain strictly defensive postures around their settlements. But they absolutely refuse to halt their expansion. Their diplomatic corps keeps referring to something called manifest destiny and the fundamental right to explore. Perhaps, offered second speaker Vorn, his ancient cybernetic systems humming softly, we should demonstrate the consequences of defiance more directly. History shows that new species require occasional object lessons in Confederation authority. Zextal's mandibles clicked nervously. With respect, honored speaker, I have concerns about that approach. Human psychological profiles are unusual. They appear to interpret direct threats as challenges rather than deterrents. Explain, commanded first speaker Ixil. When we warned them that continued expansion would result in sanctions, they increased production of self-sufficient habitat systems. When we threatened military action, they began retrofitting civilian ships with defensive capabilities. They seem to treat every obstacle as a problem to be solved rather than a reason to comply. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For millennia, the Confederation had maintained order through a careful balance of diplomatic pressure and military deterrence. But neither seemed to affect these humans as intended. There is another concern, Zextal continued reluctantly. Our xenopsychologists report that humans lack certain fundamental concepts that we've taken for granted in all other spacefaring species. They appear to have no biological or cultural imperative to submit to superior force. No instinctive recognition of hierarchical authority beyond their own chosen structures. Impossible, declared third speaker Nixis. How could such a species achieve spaceflight without proper social organization? That's just it, honored speakers. They achieved it through thousands of competing organizations, working independently and often at cross purposes. Their history is filled with examples of small groups succeeding against overwhelming odds through what they call innovation and determination. They seem to think this is normal. First speaker Ixil's surface rippled with thought patterns. You believe standard pacification protocols would be ineffective? I believe they would be counterproductive, honored speaker. Based on their historical records, Humans tend to become more unified and resourceful when faced with external threats. They have a concept they call backing into a corner, which seems to trigger extraordinary levels of cooperation and technological development. Surely they must understand their position relative to Confederation power, insisted second speaker Vorn. The disparity in military capability alone. They understand it perfectly, honored speaker, Zextal interrupted, then immediately dipped his head in apology for the breach of protocol. They simply don't consider it relevant. When our analysts pointed out that the Confederation possesses superior technology in 87% of military categories, they responded by asking about the remaining 13% and requesting technical exchanges. Preposterous. Third speaker Nixus swirled agitatedly. No species can simply ignore the reality of power dynamics. The humans have a saying, honored speaker, impossible is just a word. They appear to sincerely believe it. First speaker Ixel rose, her crystalline form casting prismatic patterns across the chamber. This requires further study. High Admiral, you will continue monitoring their expansion but take no direct action for now. We must better understand these humans before we decide how to address their irregularities. As Zextal left the chamber, his mandibles clicked in what his species equivalent of a rueful smile. He had served the Confederation for over 3 centuries, but never had he encountered a species that treated galactic law like a suggestion and overwhelming force like an interesting puzzle to be solved. He suspected the Confederation was about to learn some very uncomfortable lessons about the nature of authority in a galaxy that contained humans. In the following weeks, reports continued to flow in from across the sector. New human settlements appeared with increasing frequency, each one pushing a little further into unexplored space. Their ships now traveled in loose formations that could quickly shift between civilian and defensive configurations. Their diplomatic responses remained unfailingly polite but utterly unmoved by threats or entreaties. The Confederation found itself facing an entirely new type of challenge, a species that didn't so much resist authority as fail to acknowledge its relevance. Human expansion continued not through military might or political maneuvering, but through a simple, maddening refusal to accept that anything was impossible. As first speaker Ixil would later note in her private log, we assumed that demonstrating our power would compel their submission. We failed to understand that to humans, power itself is merely another problem awaiting a solution. The galaxy may never be the same. The Confederation Council's emergency session stretched into its 3rd day. The massive circular chamber, normally a model of orderly discourse, now hummed with agitation as reports of human activities flooded the neural networks. They've established mining operations in the Centauri Reach, third speaker Nixus reported, their gaseous form roiling with distress. Without even filing an environmental impact assessment. Second speaker Vorn's ancient servos whirred as he projected the latest intelligence. Their colonization ships have adapted to our interdiction fields. They simply route around them, treating our barriers like natural phenomena to be navigated. High Admiral Zextal stood silent, watching the Council's mounting frustration. He had warned them, but centuries of unchallenged authority had left the Confederation unable to comprehend a species that simply didn't operate according to their assumptions. First speaker Ixil's crystalline surface flickered with decision patterns. Enough. We have been patient. We have been diplomatic. Yet these humans persist in their defiance. They leave us no choice but to demonstrate the true meaning of Confederation authority. Zextal's mandibles clicked in alarm. Honored speaker, I must again counsel caution. The humans will learn, Ixil interrupted, her crystalline form pulsing with determined light. As all species must learn. Deploy the 6th Fleet to their primary colonial cluster. Show them the consequence of defiance. The 6th Fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 10,000 ships strong. Their arrival was deliberate, choreographed to demonstrate the Confederation's overwhelming military superiority. Massive dreadnoughts flanked by swarms of escort vessels, their weapons charged but inactive, a show of force meant to inspire submission through sheer scale. Admiral Kenna of the Human Colonial Defense Force stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display with remarkable calm. Interesting approach, she mused. Very theatrical. Commander Chen, are our new systems ready? Yes, Admiral. All ships report successful integration of the gravitational deflectors. Engineering is excited to see how they perform in actual combat conditions. Kenna nodded, a slight smile playing at her lips. Send the standard greeting package. Let's see if they're here to talk this time. The Confederation fleet's response came swiftly, a demand for immediate surrender and colonial withdrawal. The terms were non-negotiable: humans would submit to Confederation authority or face annihilation. Well, Kenna sighed, that answers that question. All ships, implement Protocol Omega. Let's show them why humanity stopped believing in no-win scenarios a long time ago. What followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The human fleet, drastically outnumbered, didn't behave according to any known tactical doctrine. Their ships moved in seemingly chaotic patterns, each vessel operating independently yet somehow maintaining perfect coordination. High Commander Veltx of the 6th Fleet watched in growing confusion as his carefully orchestrated attack patterns yielded no results. The humans weren't fighting back, they were simply refusing to be hit, their ships dancing through gaps in the Confederation formation that shouldn't have existed. Impossible, he muttered as another wave of precision fire passed harmlessly through empty space. Their navigational computers can't be that fast. The calculations alone. Sir, his tactical officer interrupted. The human ships are changing. On the tactical display, the human vessels were indeed transforming. Modular sections shifted and reconfigured, civilian ships becoming military vessels becoming mining platforms becoming weapons platforms. The entire fleet was morphing, adapting, becoming whatever it needed to be moment by moment. They've turned their entire colonial fleet into a combat-capable force, the tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking in disbelief. Every civilian ship, every mining vessel, every transport, they're all armed and armored. Veltx felt his core temperature drop. The humans hadn't been ignoring Confederation warnings, they'd been preparing for them. Every attempt to contain them had given them another opportunity to develop countermeasures. Sir, we're detecting energy buildups in their mining vessels. They appear to be, oh no. The mining lasers, designed to cut through asteroid rock, proved equally effective against Confederation shields. The humans had taken industrial tools and turned them into weapons of war. Not because they wanted to fight, but because the Confederation had left them no choice. All ships, maintain formation. Veltx ordered, but it was already too late. The human fleet had divided his forces, isolated key tactical units, and was systematically disabling command and control nodes. They weren't destroying ships, they were removing their ability to fight. In the Confederation Council chamber, the tactical feeds painted a picture that none had believed possible. The mighty 6th Fleet, pride of the Confederation, was being systematically dismantled by a supposedly inferior force. How? First Speaker Ixel demanded, her crystalline surface clouded with disbelief. How are they doing this? High Admiral Zextal watched the display with a mixture of professional admiration and deep concern. They're doing what humans always do, honored Speaker. They're solving the problem in front of them. We gave them a challenge, and they rose to meet it. The battle ended not with a dramatic explosion or a heroic last stand, but with the human fleet systematically disabling the last of the Confederation vessels. Admiral Kenna's voice echoed through every Confederation command channel. Your ships are disabled but your life support is intact. We'll remain in position to ensure your safety until rescue vessels arrive. Let's talk about how we can avoid this kind of misunderstanding in the future. In the council chamber, silence reigned. The Confederation had just learned an expensive lesson: humanity's refusal to accept limits wasn't mere stubbornness, it was a fundamental aspect of their nature. They didn't reject authority out of pride or defiance, but because they simply couldn't comprehend accepting any obstacle as absolute. First Speaker Ixo's voice was subdued. "High Admiral, it seems we should have heeded your warnings about human nature." "Yes, honored Speaker," Zextal replied. "The question now is, what will we learn from this lesson?" The answer would reshape the galaxy, but first, the Confederation would have to accept something they had never before encountered, a species that viewed their overwhelming power not as an end to discussion, but as the beginning of negotiation. In the aftermath of the Sixth Fleet's defeat, the Confederation's intelligence division worked overtime analyzing every detail of the encounter. Deep in the secure chambers beneath the Council spire, analysts pored over combat footage, trying to understand exactly how their superior forces had been so thoroughly outmaneuvered. Director Silvex, head of Confederation Strategic Intelligence, faced the Council with findings that challenged centuries of military doctrine. Her insectoid form remained perfectly still as she delivered her report. "The humans didn't develop these countermeasures in response to our show of force," she explained. "They had them ready. Every ship in their fleet was designed to be reconfigurable from the start. Not because they expected conflict, but because they consider adaptability itself to be essential." First Speaker Ixo's crystalline surface rippled with concern. "Explain." "Their ships aren't specialized. Every vessel is built with multiple potential functions. When we blocked their trade routes, they didn't build warships, they modified their existing ships to serve multiple roles. It's not a military doctrine, it's their basic approach to engineering." Second Speaker Vorn's cybernetic systems hummed as he processed this. "Are you suggesting they anticipated our tactics?" "No, honored Speaker. That's what makes them so dangerous. They didn't anticipate our specific actions. They simply build everything with the assumption that it might need to do something else tomorrow. They call it future-proofing." The Council chamber filled with uneasy murmurs. The concept challenged the very foundation of Confederation engineering philosophy, which prized specialization and optimization. "There's more," Silvex continued. "We've intercepted their internal communications from the battle. They weren't following a predetermined strategy. Each ship captain was improvising, coordinating with others in real time. They treated our attack as a problem to be solved collaboratively." "Impossible," Third Speaker Nixis swirled agitatedly. "No military force can function without strict hierarchical control. The humans can. Their command structure exists to facilitate cooperation rather than enforce compliance. During the battle, they were actively sharing ideas, adapting tactics on the fly. When one ship discovered a weakness in our shields, they all immediately began exploiting it in different ways." The tactical hologram showed the battle again, but this time with human communication patterns overlaid. It looked less like a military operation and more like a complex dance, each ship moving independently but in perfect harmony with the others. "Most concerning," Silvex continued, "is their response to the battle's aftermath. They're not celebrating their victory. They're analyzing their performance, identifying weaknesses, proposing improvements. They're treating the entire encounter as a learning experience." First Speaker Ixo's surface clouded. "Are you suggesting they're preparing for further conflict?" "No, honored Speaker. They're preparing for everything. Their after-action reports discuss not just military improvements, but diplomatic initiatives, cultural exchange programs, and trade proposals. They're treating military victory as merely the first step in a larger process of mutual understanding." The Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Confederation had expected either submission or aggression. Instead, they had encountered something far more challenging, a species that viewed conflict itself as merely one component of a broader spectrum of interaction. High Admiral Zextal, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Honored speakers, we face a choice. We can continue treating the humans as a problem to be solved, or we can learn from them. Their adaptability, their collaborative approach, their integration of different functions, these aren't just military tactics. They're survival strategies that have served them well. Are you suggesting we simply accept their defiance of Confederation authority? Third speaker Nixus asked. I'm suggesting we recognize that our traditional approach to authority itself may need to evolve. The humans have demonstrated that there are other ways to organize, to adapt, to progress. Their success isn't just about military capability, it's about their fundamental approach to challenges. As if to underscore his point, a new communication arrived from the human fleet. Admiral Kenna had sent a proposal, a joint human confederation task force to develop shared protocols for colonial expansion, one that would respect both human innovation and confederation experience. First speaker Ixil studied the proposal, her crystalline surface reflecting the text. They offer cooperation even after victory. Perhaps we have been asking the wrong questions. Instead of how to make them conform to our systems, we should be asking what our systems could learn from them. The council chamber buzzed with discussion. The concept of learning from a younger species was unprecedented, but then, everything about humanity had proven unprecedented. Director Silvex's final analysis would later be regarded as prophetic: the humans don't reject authority because they're defiant. They reject it because they believe every problem has a solution if you're willing to think differently enough. Our choice isn't between enforcing compliance and accepting chaos, it's between remaining static and learning to adapt. As the council debated, human ships throughout the sector continued their work, reconfiguring from battle stations back to colonial vessels. They hadn't fought to defeat the Confederation, but to prove a point, that strength lies not in unchanging power, but in the ability to become what circumstances require. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in its long history, the Confederation faced a choice: adapt alongside humanity, or risk becoming obsolete in a universe that suddenly seemed filled with possibilities rather than rules. The Confederation's prestigious Institute of Xenopsychology was in chaos. After 6 months of studying human behavior, the galaxy's foremost experts in alien psychology had produced a report that defied all conventional wisdom. Dr. Nixtel, the Institute's director, paced nervously before the council. Her translucent tentacles twisted with anxiety as she presented findings that challenged 10 millennia of established theory. The fundamental problem, she explained, is that humans don't think like a species should think. They simultaneously compete and cooperate. They recognize problems but refuse to accept them as permanent. They acknowledge limitations while actively working to transcend them. The council chamber's neural network hummed with confusion as the members processed this information. Consider their response to our initial containment efforts, Dr. Nixtel continued. When we established no-go zones, most species would either respect them or challenge them directly. Humans did neither. They mapped the zones, studied them, and began developing technologies specifically to bypass them safely. They treated our barriers not as restrictions, but as engineering challenges. First speaker Ixil's crystalline form sparkled with interest. You're suggesting their defiance isn't political? It's not defiance at all, honored speaker. To them, every boundary is theoretical. Every limit is temporary. They have a concept they call progress, the idea that any current situation is merely a step towards something better. The doctor activated a holographic display showing human historical data. Look at their development pattern. Every time they encountered a physical limitation, they developed technology to overcome it. Couldn't fly. Built aircraft. Couldn't survive in space. Created environmental systems. Couldn't travel faster than light. Invented new physics. Second speaker Vorn's cybernetic systems whirred as he processed this. But surely they understand that some limits are absolute. The laws of physics are treated as guidelines to be refined, Dr. Nixtel interrupted, then quickly dipped her tentacles in apology. When we explained that certain things were impossible according to known physics, they asked for our equations so they could look for loopholes. They view the universe not as a set of rules to be followed, but as a set of puzzles to be solved. The hologram shifted to show human research facilities. In each one, teams worked on problems that the Confederation had long ago deemed unsolvable. Their collaborative pattern is equally baffling, Dr. Nixtel continued. They compete fiercely in some areas while cooperating seamlessly in others. Different groups will race to solve the same problem, then freely share their solutions. They call it healthy competition, a concept that our translators still struggle to convey accurately. Third speaker Nixis swirled thoughtfully. How do they maintain social order without accepting fundamental limitations? That's just it, honored speaker. Their social order isn't based on acceptance of limits. It's based on a shared commitment to overcoming them. They have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When faced with something they can't do, their default response is to figure out how to do it anyway. The doctor highlighted a particularly troubling section of her report. Most concerning is their response to failure. In most species, failure reinforces limitations. Humans treat failure as data. They have an entire philosophical framework built around learning from mistakes. They fail repeatedly, deliberately, systematically, all in service of eventually succeeding. First speaker Ixel's surface rippled with realization. This explains their military performance. They didn't just develop countermeasures to our tactics. They used our very efforts to contain them as a development laboratory, Dr. Nixtel confirmed. Every failed attempt taught them something new. They have another saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. They mean it literally. The council chamber fell into contemplative silence. The implications were staggering. How do you control a species that views control itself as merely another problem to be solved? There's one more thing, Dr. Nixtel added hesitantly. They're aware of our study of them. Instead of being concerned, they've offered to help us understand them better. They've proposed joint research projects, cultural exchange programs, even shared educational initiatives. They want to learn about us while we learn about them. First speaker Ixel's crystalline surface shimmered with decision patterns. They turn even our attempts to understand them into opportunities for mutual growth. Doctor, what do you recommend? Dr. Nixtel's tentacles waved in what her species equivalent of a shrug. We can continue trying to force them into our existing models, or we can acknowledge that they represent something new. They've already proposed a framework for cooperation that allows for both their drive to expand and our need for order. Perhaps we should stop trying to understand them through our traditional lens and instead learn to see the galaxy as they do, full of problems waiting to be solved. As if to emphasize her point, new data streamed into the Council's neural network. Human ships had discovered a way to stabilize failing stars using modified mining technology. They were already sharing the technique with Confederation worlds, not for profit or advantage, but simply because they could. The Council members exchanged glances. They had sought to understand humanity in order to control it. Instead, they found themselves confronting a far more challenging possibility, that humanity's refusal to accept limitations might actually be a better way to face the galaxy's challenges. The future suddenly seemed less certain, but paradoxically more promising. The humans had a word for this feeling too, opportunity. 1 year after the failed attempt to contain humanity, the Great Council chamber had transformed. Where once only council members and high-ranking Confederation officials gathered, now representatives from dozens of species mingled freely, including, most notably, humans. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the podium, her presence itself a symbol of how much had changed. Behind her, a holographic display showed the results of the first joint Human Confederation deep space expedition. The Combined Exploration Initiative has charted over 3,000 new systems in the past 6 months, she reported. By integrating Confederation navigational protocols with human adaptive exploration techniques, we've reduced survey times by 82% while increasing safety margins by 60%. The chamber hummed with appreciative murmurs. Even the most conservative council members couldn't deny the results. But the real breakthrough, Chen continued, came from something unexpected. When we stopped trying to enforce rigid protocols and started encouraging creative problem solving, we discovered that every species had unique approaches we'd never considered. The NXT's spatial awareness, combined with human improvisational tactics and Confederation precision, has revolutionized our understanding of hyperspace dynamics. First speaker Ixil, her crystalline form gleaming with new patterns of integration, addressed the chamber. We feared that human expansion would bring chaos. Instead, it has brought evolution. Not just technological, but philosophical. High Admiral Zextal, now serving as liaison between Confederation and human fleet operations, stepped forward. The combined fleet exercises have shown similar results. Human adaptability, merged with Confederation discipline, has produced capabilities neither of us could have achieved alone. We're not just sharing technology, we're sharing ways of thinking. The evidence was visible throughout Confederation space. Hybrid ships incorporating both human flexibility and Confederation efficiency. Trading posts where multiple species collaborated on solving shared challenges. Research stations where different approaches to physics, engineering, and even biology merged to create new possibilities. The galaxy didn't need more rules, Ambassador Chen observed. It needed more options. By working together, we're not just solving problems, we're discovering new questions we never thought to ask. Director Silvex of Strategic Intelligence, who had once feared human unpredictability, now embraced it. Their influence has spread beyond technology and exploration. Species that once competed now collaborate. Worlds that were stagnant are innovating. The humans' refusal to accept limitations has proven infectious. The council chamber's screens displayed statistics that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Technological advancement rates up 300%. Interspecies cooperation at unprecedented levels. Even ancient conflicts were giving way to collaborative problem solving. We still maintain order, first speaker Ixil noted, but it's a different kind of order. Not rigid control, but dynamic stability. The humans call it controlled chaos, a state where innovation and tradition can coexist. Third speaker Nixis, once the strongest advocate for containing humanity, now swirled with patterns of acceptance. They've taught us that strength lies not in enforcing limitations, but in transcending them together. Every species brings unique perspectives, unique solutions. Ambassador Chen smiled. That's why we never could accept artificial constraints on our expansion. Not because we wanted to defy you, but because we saw so much potential in working together. The galaxy isn't a finite resource to be managed, it's an infinite frontier of possibilities. The chamber's neural network pulsed with new data, another breakthrough, this time from a joint team studying dark matter. They'd solved a problem the Confederation had declared impossible centuries ago, not through superior technology, but through the simple human practice of refusing to accept that it couldn't be done. Perhaps, first speaker Ixil suggested, her crystalline surface refracting new possibilities, this is what true civilization looks like. Not a single way of doing things, but a continuous evolution of ideas and approaches. Not control, but collaboration. The council chamber, once the symbol of unchanging authority, had become a forum for innovation. Species that had once sought only to maintain their position now eagerly shared new discoveries, new approaches, new ways of thinking. High Admiral Zextal, watching human and Confederation ships practicing complex maneuvers together in perfect harmony, summarized the transformation. We thought we needed to teach them how to fit into our galaxy. Instead, they taught us how to reimagine it. As the session concluded, Ambassador Chen shared one final human saying that had become something of a motto for this new era: the only real limits are the ones we accept. The galaxy was changing, growing, evolving. The Confederation had learned that true strength lay not in maintaining the status quo, but in embracing the possibility of something better. And humanity, true to its nature, was already looking toward the next horizon, the next challenge, the next impossible thing to make possible. Together, they were writing a new chapter in galactic history, one where the future was limited only by imagination, and where every species contributed to a shared journey of discovery. The humans had a word for this too: progress.